Hey, Chris Manning here from the Locked On Cavaliers podcast. Coming up on today's show, Evan and I are going to talk about Kevin Love because we sort of have to, Cavs Magic, and the play-in tournament remaining a thing in the NBA beyond this bizarre COVID-19 condensed season. Before we get started, I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by Michelob Ultra. At only 2.6 carbs and 95 calories, it's only worth it if you enjoy it. Stay tuned for the Ultra Player of the Week coming up later in the episode. Evan, how you doing, buddy? We're here on Wednesday. It's WKYC episode day. How are you?
I'm doing great. Starting my training for the Velosano. For those who listened yesterday, if you're a regular listener, I signed up to do that. So if you're able to donate, I have the link on my Twitter page, and would really appreciate it if you can. But really overwhelmed and super stoked so far. I've raised over $300, and that's in less than a day. So gonna probably hit my $1,000 goal, and hopefully get more than that, and we can beat cancer. But I'm doing good, all things considered. I'm a lot less fried compared to last night's episode for sure. How are you?
Doing good. It's a beautiful day in Cleveland, Ohio. A beautiful, well,
It
Clevelandish.
is.
I can't claim that I live in Cleveland proper, but it is a beautiful day in Northeast Ohio. It is
It
like
is.
dang near 80 degrees. It is sunny out. It's nice. It's good to have some actual spring after we had frost on the ground like 2 days ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, it may be called for the NFL draft, but here's hoping the Browns take the right player. Chris, before we get started, I'm going to ask you this every day. Who's a player that intrigues you for the Browns in the first round?
Um, I think you got to go defense. So Newsome from the corner from Northwestern seems fun.
Yeah, seems like a good pick. You always could upgrade on
I've
Baker
had
Mayfield.
a fever dream that the Browns gave up draft capital to get Kyle Pitts to game break the offense with the tight end, but there's literally no way that could be a thing.
Oh, no, absolutely not. And one last question. Who gets an extension first, Baker Mayfield or Colin Sexton?
Well, both extension eligible, both are probably going to wait a year. I'm going to go Sexton because I think there's a better chance he gets one this summer than Baker.
Okay, I think you and I are on the same page there. If you are listening for the first time or a regular listener, let us know on social media. You can find me at amnotevan. You can find Chris at CWM Rights, and we are both on for the show at Locked On Cavs on Twitter, also on Instagram, and leave us a 5-star review with your thoughts too. That'd be really appreciated. But Chris, it is Wednesday for this episode of Locked On Cavaliers, and the Cavs take on the Orlando Magic. Kind of an interesting game, honestly. I mean, you really think about it, it's a very bad Magic team taking on a try-hard but still bad Cavs squad. There's some draft implications on this one. Like, if the Cavs lose, they narrow the gap a little bit with Orlando for, I think, the fourth or fifth worst record, one of the two. It's fourth. And things could get a little interesting from there.
Yeah, so we're on Tuesdays. We're recording this, and there is a slate of games that hasn't finalized yet in terms of the Tuesday night slate of NBA games. The Orlando Magic are not playing on Tuesday, so there's not going to be any impact there. But Cleveland is 6 games back of the number of the worst record in the league. That is the Houston Rockets, who are just out tanking everyone, and they are 3 games back of the Orlando Magic. Now, Evan, I think when you think about this, I don't think the Cavs are going to. I don't think they can out-tank any of these bottom 5 teams.
No.
I think the thing that is most interesting that could happen is if I don't believe that the Wolves are good, but this is a team that has been better when they've had D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns. They've been better under Chris Finch, who just gave them an improvement at head coach. Detroit just seemingly picks up some wins here and there a little bit. The Thunder obviously are perhaps the worst quality team in the league right now, maybe even worse than Houston, as they're just outwardly tanking. I wonder if there is a chance that 1 or 2 teams in the Cavs slip back into that bottom 5. I think it's possible. Obviously, only 11 games left, so not a ton of time. And Minnesota would really have to go on a run to kind of get out of that bottom. And I don't know what their sort of thought process is, but it's interesting times here. And I don't think anyone should root for losses, but I think it's worth monitoring, as you alluded to.
Yeah, it really is interesting to monitor. I think Minnesota and Houston are out of reach, even though Houston does have Christian Wooden, who is a most improved player candidate for sure. Kevin Porter Jr. has been playing really well for them. I'm sure that hurts Cavs fans to hear a little bit, but I know Minnesota is 8-6 with D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns playing together, so maybe they win a few more games. I think Houston and Minnesota have to play each other at one point or another. I know Sacramento has to play the Thunder a little bit too, so that could be I know the Kings are still kind of being disruptors for other teams' seasons, but they could very well be a disruptor for Oklahoma City's plans as well if they start falling apart at the seams. But I think Cleveland's just kind of locked into this 5-6 spot right now, record wise. I don't really see a way of them catching up to Minnesota or Houston for 1-2. I think Orlando's out of reach, and let's say Orlando wins a few. Oklahoma City will gladly jump up to that third spot, and then things get really funky then. Because let's say OKC jumps to 1 in the lottery, and then Houston drops to 4. The Thunder get the first and the fourth pick. Credit where credit's due to Sam Presti for some good team management. But Chris, we should focus to this game on hand. The Cavs take on the Magic. The Magic just signed Mo Wagner, who is a stretch 5 who cannot shoot, who is a player you and I kind of thought maybe the Cavs could take a stab at, or at least get some familiarity for Franz in the future. But what matchup are you looking forward to most between the Magic and the Cavs tonight?
I want to see how Darius Garland handles the kind of continuing leading the offense. I don't know if we're going to see a healthy Cavs team for this Wednesday game. And look, Orlando just isn't very good at the moment. They are over the last 2 weeks. Here's just some numbers from one of my favorite sites that I cite all the time, Cleveland Glass. 1-6 over the last 2 weeks. 29th in net rating. They are negative 15.3 per 100 possessions. That is the same as Oklahoma City. They are 27th at offense at 106.8 per 100 possessions, and they are dead last at 122.2 per 100 possessions in defensive rating. For a Steve Clifford team, that is like signs of the apocalypse, signs of a team that has been ravaged by injuries and is, obviously traded Evan Fournier and Nikola Vucevic at the trade deadline. Obviously Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac are both injured, and those are two very key pieces for them. Just an incredibly bummer of a team. And like when Mo Wagner is sort of like your glimmer in the, shot in the dark here, because like Mo Bamba isn't like doing it for you, like that's tough, but they're not very good. And even if the Cavs are like also kind of meh, especially like when they're banged up and not looking at their best, like Orlando's probably going to be significantly worse. But to answer your question directly, it's all about Darius Garland for me as we kind of go towards the end of the season.
Yeah, Darius is going to be a key one for sure. But speaking of point guards, I'm looking at the Orlando side of things. I'm intrigued by Cole Anthony. Steve Clifford coached teams. Their point guards do really well. Look at Kemba Walker in Charlotte while Steve Clifford was the coach. That's really good work there. But in the month of April, Cole Anthony is averaging 13.6 points, 5.8 assists, half a block, half a steal per game. He's averaging those 13.6 points on 41.9% shooting. He's playing really well for the Magic, and especially taking advantage of the fact that Markelle Fultz is out. I think that's going to be Isaac Okoro's primary target on defense tomorrow night, because he's kind of the head of the snake for Orlando. This isn't a good Magic team. They were up 10 or so, I believe, on the Lakers last night while Cleveland was losing to Toronto or Tampa, if you were to get technical about it. But Cole Anthony in that game had 15.7 assists. He is a huge threat for the Magic, and even if the Magic aren't bad, the Cavs still have to take these teams seriously because, let's be frank, there's not much of a gap between Orlando and Cleveland record-wise, and the Magic could easily sneak up on them. So I think Okoro is going to draw the Cole Anthony assignment, and it's just going to kind of be interesting to see what happens from there. Maybe Okoro kind of shuts down Anthony, and it kind of makes Orlando's offense fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, Orlando also does just have some interesting younger and some rehabilitation prospects. Obviously, they got Wendell Carter Jr., him and Jared Allen. Wendell's, I think, been a little bit better since he got to Orlando. They obviously have RJ Hampton coming off the bench who they got in the Aaron Gordon trade, because another guy that they traded at the deadline. Gary Harris is the starting 2 guard for this team, or starting 3, depending on how you kind of want to situate it. Jim Okeke is a pretty interesting player, and perhaps maybe their most interesting young player. And I kind of wanted to see how all this sort of shakes out in terms of just how the Cavs kind of match up with this and stuff. See how Jared Allen does against Wendell Carter Jr. Jared's been a little up and down at times lately, but he should significantly be better than Wendell Carter. And I do want to see Darius get guarded by Gary Harris. Gary, obviously the 3-point shot has become a thing for him in terms of what his highest ceiling is. It has just fallen off a cliff for multiple years now. It's part of the reason why Denver viewed him as expendable, but he's still a really good defender with long arms and good reach, and he's really strong. So I want to see how Darius maybe does against a guy like that. Again, this is kind of classic late season struggle basketball. It might not be the most fun, fluid game. You might get a close game, but I don't, know if this game is going to be particularly fun. But the Magic did the other night drop 40 points in a quarter on the Lakers, and they ended up losing that game, but they did drop 40 on LA in a quarter. So they have spurts in them at least. And what kind of Cleveland shows up, we might know early as we kind of see what kind of goes on with this game.
Yeah. No, we really, really do here. And before we head up for our first break of the show, Chris, what's your final prediction for this one?
I think the Cavs win by 5.
I think that's a pretty fair estimate. Orlando's
we do not have odds yet. I do not think.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
I'm looking at it now. ESPN's matchup predictor gives Cleveland a 57.7% chance of winning, which isn't overwhelming, and they think that the Cleveland will win by less than 3 points, 110.2 to 107.3 based on team rankings and everything else they have in between that. So it's going to be a close matchup for sure, just because I don't know, there's a little bit of similarity between this Cleveland team, but with Darius Garland being so hot, I don't know, and plus, maybe with Colin Sexton being out because of concussion protocol, still, I wouldn't be surprised to see Darius have maybe another big game. And speaking of Darius Garland, Chris, we might be alluding a little bit to this fact, or to our awards this week, but we got some bills to pay. Why don't you tell me all about it?
Yeah, so we have our friends at Michelob Ultra up here first, and look, Michelob Ultra is a fantastic beer. 95 calories, 2.6 carbs, and remember, it's only worth it if you enjoy it. And I think we definitely enjoy a nice Michelob Ultra here on the Locked On Cavs podcast and really across the whole network.
I'm a big Michelob Ultra guy. They took good care of me with their swag box. Love them to pieces.
And we have to give our Ultra Player of the Week here. So again, the Ultra Player of the Week is a player who creates joy, happiness, enjoyment on the basketball court. And as you alluded to, I think the clear pick is Darius Garland, who has been awesome of late and is taking a leap forward.
No, he really has been. For the month of April, Darius is averaging almost 21 points on almost 50% shooting, which is incredible thinking about just his career averages and everything else and just how lackluster he's been at points. But to go with that, also 7.5 assists, looking composed as the maestro of this offense, and 1.4 steals, which is even more impressive in itself. His turnovers are down and as of late, and Darius Garland is for sure our Michelob Ultra Player of the Week.
Again, are you happy because you win, or do you win because you're happy? Michelob Ultra is asking you that. And again, enjoyment is the end game. It's the whole game. So go get a Michelob Ultra, 2.6 carbs, 95 calories, and please drink responsibly. Also, just want to shout out our other Cleveland podcasts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Browns with Jeff Floyd. Check that out. Deep dives into the Browns every single day of the week. And dive into the Locked On Indians podcast with Jeff Ellis to touch on the Cleveland baseball team and what's going on with them. They're out there playing, I think, right now as we speak. And also Locked On Ohio State, if you're also a Buckeye fan, which you're in Ohio, a lot of people tend to be. They haven't, greenlit my Locked On Jason Preston pod yet, but someday a boy can dream. Anyway, Evan, let's talk a little bit about Kevin Love. We have to do this, unfortunately. I don't think this is a segment that...
Do you love talking about Kevin Love right now?
No, I think. Look, I think you wrote this very eloquently at Fear the Sword. I think the Kevin Love discourse is quite silly. I understand that play that everyone sort of, I'm sure, has seen by now. It doesn't look good, right?
If you know, you know.
This was not a play that...
For those listening, Chris doesn't know because he didn't watch SpongeBob as a kid. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I had to look that up when I was editing your story. It's
an iconic episode. And Mr. Krabs, spoilers for those who hasn't seen it, Chris included, Mr. Krabs is the reason why the clam is crying because Mr. Krabs stole the clam's pearl. That's the big scene.
All I know about SpongeBob is that Mr. Krabs is an extreme capitalist and the problem. Anyway, Kevin Love is this very tricky thing to discuss because on one hand, again, that play is incredibly stupid. He lost his composure in a 2-possession game, gave the Magic a clean shot. No, let me.
Should we give context of why it happened?
That's what I'm getting to. We're getting there. Let me roll here, buddy. So he also had cut his knee. He'd been in some discomfort. I think it's seemingly the ball just kind of got thrown to him, and I don't know if it doesn't even seem like he fully realized that he had to inbound the ball. It's just a very confusing thing. But he looked sort of in discomfort. I wonder if he just was kind of saw red. The team is obviously, said now that like they're handling it internally and yada yada. I just I think what has happened here, more than like something new that we need to discuss, it is that this is just bringing up conversations that have either been had privately or had been had before or whatever. They're just bringing them up to the forefront because there's this very public thing that sort of happened. I think that's all this sort of is, more than like, again, it's not good. It's probably not as bad as as it's made out to be. And I don't think Kevin has I don't think Kevin should be like suspended or fined or anything. I think that's silly, but I don't think it's like a good move from one of your veteran leaders. But I also just am like, is this just exasperating feelings that are already sort of there and sort of pointing out a reality of the situation more than it is like creating some new wound that the Cavs have to deal with? I wonder if we're talking about this too dramatically.
I think we are taking this a lot too dramatically. I think people are reading way too much into this. I think that's the case with Kevin Love at this point. If you put this on the Kevin Love nuclear level meltdowns that he's had ever since LeBron has left town, this is on the absolute bottom of the totem pole, I think, at least in terms of public meltdowns. Like the slapping of the bench thing, it's on par with that, and he was fine for that, and the team moved on. Like people were upset in the moment about that, but moved past it. But for some reason, we're still talking about it. But no, the blow up on John Beilein and Kobe Altman, and where he allegedly said, "I make enough money, go ahead and fine me." Like, I think that's the worst thing Kevin Love's done. He didn't even get suspended for that. I think he was fined, and then the Cavs just moved forward with it. And then Kevin made a public apology and told the media like he wasn't in the right headspace. He apologized. He shouldn't have said what he said. I know Jason Lloyd is advocating that Kevin should be suspended for this, but like you said, and thank you for giving context. Didn't mean to cut you off before, but yeah, Kevin had a cut in his knee because you and I both had that reaction last night when we talked about it on the show. I'm like, oh great, Kevin's hurt again, because he was grabbing his lower leg at first, and I thought he was grabbing like his actual like back of his lower leg, like where his calf Achilles was.
Twisted. I thought he had like twisted his knee, and I was like, oh, like he's gonna have to like come out and
Yeah,
get this looked
and
at.
then
But it was a cut,
then
which also I'm sure felt terrible.
Yeah, and he lifted his knee pad. You could see there was a bit of a gash there, and it was because he was pushed down. It wasn't a foul called, so he was clearly upset with the officiating. I think if you really like break down the footage, if you like Zapruder film this a little bit, you can see that the ref, who is a G League ref because of COVID, there's ref restrictions, and this ref may not have as much experience officiating at the NBA level. Normally it seemed like he was checking the ball to Kevin, checking it back, but and then you watch Kevin lackadaisically walk down the court. So clearly he was trying. There was a little bit of frustration. And so I want to give Kevin the benefit of the doubt, but it was an unacceptable moment. And you and I talked about it again, but this is a hot button issue where people are saying, like Jason Lloyd's advocating that the Cavs suspend Kevin Love for one game. There's people who are saying that they should buy him out immediately or send him home. Folks, this is not like the Andre Drummond thing. This isn't like a J.R. Smith thing. Shouts to friend of the show, Carter Rodriguez, who's telling us in private, who are the Cavs going to replace Kevin Love? Larry Nance has a broken, if they were to send him home, Larry Nance has a fractured hand, can't play him. You could play Dean Wade, but you're doing a disservice to the rest of this team by not putting Kevin Love out there, because Kevin Love organically makes this Cavs team better, bumps the offensive rating by 10 points, I believe, off the top of my head.
I think just like you watch the games, I think we've said this a lot, it just pops on film.
Yep. No, the spacing's better. Like Jared Allen looks better because the Cavs can go theoretically 4 out. And I know Isaac Okoro isn't the best shooter, but you have to respect his shot. It makes Isaac Okoro better because for the same reason Jared Allen, for Jared Allen, it provides spacing for the Cavs as well. Like theoretically, and like you said, film doesn't lie either. When you can watch it with the eye test, the team is better when Kevin Love plays. And I think it's silly, and I think it's just a huge knee-jerk reaction to say the Cavs should suspend him immediately, or they should tell him to go home until they figure out the next steps, whether that's a buyout or a trade or something else. But I just think people are just trying to get their kicks in and shots in while they can. We'll talk a little bit about this before we wrap this up. But like I wrote on Fear the Sword, people like to wave their fingers and scream until they're red in the face that the Cavs are paying Kevin Love near max money and he should be acting like that. Yeah, sure. He should be playing up to those expectations, maybe a bit more. But at the same time, the Cavs were also the team who gave Kevin Love that money, well knowing the fact that he was entering his 30s, is an injury-prone player, and that things could go sideways if the team doesn't head in the right direction. Anything can happen. Let's just say it like that. Like what David
Yeah.
Griffin says with the power of hindsight, his biggest regret was giving J.R. Smith all that money. I'm sure maybe if you gave Kobe Altman some truth serum, he would probably say he regrets giving Kevin Love all that money because that contract is impossible to move because of his injury history. And the overall attitude and stuff is sometimes a hard sell for some owners, but I think he's been playing the good team guy for a while now, and I think that helps. And he is, like he said, he's all in on Sexland. Like, I don't know how all in he is on it, but he's saying it publicly, so that helps him look like a team player, especially in a rebuilding situation. I don't know, man. I just think people are being a little weird, a little silly, like you said about this. I think people are dragging Kevin Love. He's always been the punching bag from the moment he came here. And we should just kind of appreciate the fact that there's a great player who was key to the team winning a championship in 2016 and a key part of those 4 finals runs. Just appreciate his time while he's still here because it's coming to a close sooner or later. And maybe he's the last domino that needs to fall before the Cavs can really move forward. But until then, maybe give the guy a break.
Here's the number one. I just want to point. I keep pointing this out, but I just feel like I need to say it on here. It is absolutely hilarious that the Cavs like took him down and like had him sign his contract at the under construction arena. That is just like objectively a hilarious rollout to like, hey Kevin, you're gonna sign your mega contract in front of these construction workers on like a lunch break or whatever. Like objectively just quite silly and dumb. Number two,
Well, like
especially because he's wearing like a really nice suit, you know, like the whole thing was just
oh yeah,
bizarre.
That suit probably costs more than the combined salary of some of those workers.
Yep. Number two, I empathize with Kevin in that he said this like in some interviews that like it was kind of a shock, and I think Channing Frye, his friend who's been like supporting him on Twitter, I don't think Channing was right in saying the Cavs are tanking. I think that's sort of like inaccurate to what they're doing. I'm empathetic to that, but here's the other thing. Yes, the Cavs signed him to this contract. Like they offered it to him and he took it. And I'm never going to fault him for taking the most amount of money you possibly can get. But Kevin Love is smart enough to understand that this was a possibility. To know that like if he was doing his like a Doctor Strange impression and was seeing all the possible outcomes that could happen, no matter what Kobe Altman did or did not say to him that summer or whatever, he had to know that this version of the Cavs post LeBron, he's a smart enough guy who's been around the league long enough. He had to know that this was possible. And if
Especially
he wanted to be
with what he
if he wanted exactly, and if he wanted to pick to play meaningful basketball at this stage in his career, even if it means less money, he would have had the ability to do that. But he took the amount of money, and I can't fault him for it. Maybe he gets bought out. I don't know what the amount of like he's got 2 years left in the deal. I think it's like 31 and 28.9 million. Like if he gives back 15, 20, like is that enough? I don't know. That's just speculation. All I'm saying is he also had to know that this was possible. Like again, like I empathize with that. I'm sure it is not fun. I'm sure he after making 4 straight finals, like being injured and playing on a bad team for several years is probably not fun. But you had to know that this was possible. The Cavs had to know that this was possible. Kevin had to know that this could have been the Cavs, and this was a reality that could be facing them. It is not like, frankly, this is like not surprising to me that this is where the Cavs ended up post LeBron. This is what happens when you lose a generational talent, arguably the best player of all time, the best player in your franchise's history. There's nothing in the last 20 years of the Cleveland Cavaliers that has resembled success when it does not involve LeBron James. That is just what it is. LeBron has been the driver of success for this franchise for like 20 years. And when he goes, until they prove that they can do it, this is a reality you're staring down. And I think they're on the way back up, but there was always going to be a significant downfall once you go LeBron, and there's nothing really left to build with aside from the pick that became Colin Sexton, and then you go from there. I just want everyone. A part of me does think that a breakup would be better for everyone, just because we could just both go get what they sort of want out of this and move forward, and the Cavs can do whatever they're going to do. But like, I think that it's just one of those things where like when Kevin retires and writes a really nice memoir or something, there's a lot that I would like to sort of pick his brain on if he was going to be fully honest, which, you know, he doesn't really have incentive to be fully transparent about what he's thinking right now because it'll just look bad and whatever. But Evan, let's pay some bills. I got to say, if Kevin was feeling a little bit hangry, he could check out our friends at Built Bar.
Yeah. Really could.
Built Bar. Yeah, so Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the market. They have a bunch of great flavors, including caramel brownie. They've had cookie dough chunk. They have cherry barcia, apple almond crisp, peanut butter, banana bread, and mint brownie. They are great for the health conscious guy that can be lose or maintain weight while indulging in a delicious treat. They're low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high fiber, great for a keto diet. If you look at like the numbers on these, for instance, cookies and cream, one of Evan's favorite flavors is found his absolute favorite flavor, 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs. Right now, get a free cooler with purchase. That's while supplies last. And go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com.
And speaking of Kevin Love being hangry, maybe he wants to take some of that big fat paycheck of his and turn it even more. And he could do that with our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. The baseball season is in full swing, and you can track all the action on BetOnline. This week has tons of sports action on the go as well. The NFL Draft is on, and the Kentucky Derby is back with the first leg of the Triple Crown beginning this weekend. You can get all the latest news, odds, and info for your sporting needs, including the MLB, NBA, NHL, and all your UFC/MMA action. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as team preps for their runs to the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, but only if you use the promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Get all the
let's talk
news you need in under 20 minutes with the Locked On Today podcast. Okay. Host Pete Bukowski updates you on the latest news in every major sport with the help of our local experts. Follow the Locked On Today podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Chris, as you were saying, what's up?
Yeah, I jumped the gun a little bit. I was seeing some Gary Payton II news and like blacked out for a second.
What's going on?
He's his end of his second contract. He's 28 already, which makes me feel old, as I'm also almost 28. Anyway,
I am 28, and I feel old every day.
Amen, brother. All right, so
if you watch SpongeBob, you'd know all about being old. But alas, poor Yorick, I hardly knew thee.
All right. Anyway, let's. Last thing we got to talk about here is that it seems like the play-in tournament is here to stay beyond the season. I just want to. We haven't really talked about this, even like off air, off the pod. What do you think about that? Are you into the play-in tournament?
Yeah, I'm into the idea because it de-incentivizes tanking. Like, first off, there's already the flattened lottery odds, so teams should be not looking to actively tank unless you're Minnesota or Houston or Oklahoma City being the most egregious offenders of this. But it gives teams that are kind of like in that treadmill of suckiness that is the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Chicago Bulls and others, like an opportunity to kind of play for something meaningful in these doldrum games in late April and early May, and I guess March as well if this was a regular season too. But I don't know, it gives the team something to play for if like the season isn't as decided as early now. It makes things a little exciting, especially because it's the 7th and 8th seed that is up for grabs. So you go 7, 8, 9, 10, you play a winner-go-home situation with 7 playing 10 and 8 playing 7 theoretically record-wise, and then the winners of the first game becomes the 7th seed, and I think I don't know how it works off the top of my head fully, but either way, I think it's fun. I think it's a fun process. I think it was fun when they had that slight play-in game last year in the bubble. I think it's going to be fun this year. I think maybe the Cavs will be a serious play-in team next year, depending on how the draft and free agency goes for them. So I'll be even more excited to check it out, but it's going to be a fun concept because there is something a little bit more exciting when it's high-stake basketball like that, where it's not like a best-of-5 or a best-of-7 series. Like, it's win or go home. And, like, that's why March Madness is so exciting, because also anything can happen, too. Like, you could catch a team at a bad time or another team is just feeling it and, like, sneak into the postseason. That'd be pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I think it'll be, like, more fun in the West. Like, if we get Dame versus Steph, like, I'm going to be just having the power for that one. I can understand, like, where, like, Draymond and, like, you know, some like, the Maverick stuff is what it is, but, like,
the Maverick stuff makes me laugh every time because Mark Cuban was the biggest proponent of this thing. And now that his team is in the play-in spot, he's like, I don't like it anymore.
Exactly. what I like about it is that I am very pro this idea that like not everything needs to be like all or nothing in the way we talk about sports. Or like I don't think it all needs to be titles or nothing else. I think we need to have a more reasonable middle ground for teams to like I just this they call me like a snowflake, whatever. Like I just sort of think like being really successful and like maybe you don't win a title, but you make several runs at the playoffs and you make a run in the second round of the Western Conference Finals. Like if you could be the Portland Trailblazers for like a long period of time, again, I understand that gets stale and like, you know, maybe Terry Stotts gets fired there and like Dame, like whatever. I just think like there's something sort of like really hard about doing that and being a playoff team for so long and overcoming odds, like building something that is actually sustainable, especially when you're not one of these elite markets. And Cleveland is not an elite market. Like you're just never going to have like the KD Kyrie thing for Brooklyn that turned into the KD Kyrie James Harden thing is just never going to happen for Cleveland. That is just not the reality that's going to happen. So I think it gives you something. And look, I for us covering the Cavs, listening to Darius Garland like talk about it after they lost that game to the Bulls a couple weeks ago on a Saturday, and JB talk about it and Kevin talking about it, like you could tell that maybe not as much for Kevin because he's played in high levels, has been around a little longer, but like Darius was like, I want to play some meaningful basketball. Like these guys don't like losing. Like they're competitive as hell. Like they don't want to be in a situation where they are playing meaningless basketball over and over and over again. They don't like being on the treadmill of mediocrity. I think it gives you something to incentivize. And I think if you can, there's other things that probably need to happen to fully make the regular season seem like it matters in the NBA a little bit more. But I do think that this is a step towards making it a little bit matter because I don't think tanking is like if you have a bunch of teams like tanking, it is not particularly fun for those teams, nor does it make for fun games to watch. And ultimately, like sport is an entertainment product, and I think competitiveness. I think if you can beat an organization that even if like I think being sustainably competitive there's something really admirable about that. It's sort of my just here. And I think if this is a thing that in this new iteration of the Cavs, as they're continuing to move post LeBron, and I apologize that we keep mentioning LeBron, but like I just sort of think like he's the defining guy and like he marks errors for this team. I do think that if this can get you to a point where you're actually trying to be more sustainably competitive, that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all. And it's something that's kind of endearing about this Cavs squad as a whole is during training camp, Colin Sexton said, yeah, my goal is to make the playoffs this year and also be a part of the 50-40-90 club. I think he's going to accomplish neither of those things. But with the playoff stuff, I mean, Kobe Altman backed him on it. JB Bickerstaff backed him on it. I'm sure, Darius Garland backed him on it. Like, players on this Cavs team want to try and win. Like Colin told me back in January, I want to be a part of this, but I am sick of losing, so I'm going to try and do whatever I can to make sure that we aren't losing as much anymore. The Cavs clearly aren't winning more, but they're doing better at least. I mean, winning more in the sense like they're not world beaters, but yeah, no, I think that's just a good thing. Like you want teams to build cultures that are just conducive to winning as well, and I think maybe adding that little extra nugget of, oh, you might have an opportunity to play in for the playoffs. Yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's a fun thing. I think it's fun.
I think that's all exactly right. Evan, any final thoughts? Any other tweaks to the play-in tournament or anything like that you would like to go with here? Anything you want to get off your chest before we wrap it up?
Gosh, well, I pay my therapist to talk about what's on my chest and on my mind, but for those listening, and especially on any audio format, anywhere you can find your podcast, please come join us tonight at 6:30 for Wednesday for Locker Room. We're doing it a day early this week because of the NFL draft starting on Thursday. We don't want to take away anyone's attention from that. So yeah, come join us at 6:30. It's available on Android and iOS devices now, so anyone can come join. We had a pretty good crew last time, a pretty good group. So come hang out, come chat with us. It'll be for about a half hour or so right before the Magic game, and yeah, we'll see you then.
Yeah, join us in the Locker Room. Download the app. There's also an Android beta. And thanks again to our sponsors, Michelob Ultra, Built Bar, and BetOnline for sponsoring the show. Until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching on WKYC. And we'll talk to you after Cavs Magic, wherever you get your podcasts.